I used to believe that love within a family was sacred, a language that could never lie. That even when things were hard, blood would protect what the heart couldn't. I was wrong. My name is Vanessa Carter. I'm 25 years old, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect your dreams are the ones who quietly burn them down, all while smiling like they're doing you a favor. When I was a kid, my dad always called me his bright star. He'd say it every time I brought home straight A's or when I stayed up late helping Mom balance the family bills after his business trips went longer than expected. I believed him. I thought he meant it. Because when you're a little girl, you don't know that sometimes words are just mirrors meant to keep you from seeing the truth. Growing up, I was taught that we didn't have much, but we had each other. Mom worked as a nurse long, exhausting shifts, while Dad called himself an entrepreneur. That was his favorite word. It sounded impressive enough to hide that most of his ventures ended in debt. But I didn't question it. I adored him. He was charming, funny, magnetic, the kind of man who could talk his way through a hurricane, and for years he did. When I turned 16, my grandmother Margaret sat me down at her kitchen table with a glass jar full of coins and a bank statement. She said, "This is the start of your future." She had been saving for my college education since the day I was born. Later, my mom joined in setting aside part of her paycheck each month. I worked summers at a cafe contributing what I could. Eventually, that small jar became a solid fund more than $40,000. Enough for tuition rent and a dream. It was more than money, it was faith. Every cent carried a message: we believe in you. By the time I was accepted into King's College London for my master's program in computer science, I was proud not just for myself, but for all of us. My dad beamed at the acceptance letter, telling everyone how his little genius was going to make the family proud. He hugged me tight at the airport that fall. I remember how warm his jacket felt, how his voice cracked when he said, "You're gonna change the world, kiddo." I never imagined that a few years later I'd remember that same hug and feel only cold. Life in London wasn't easy, but it was mine. I worked part-time at a bookstore, studied until midnight most nights, and called home every Sunday. Mom would ask if I was eating properly. Grandma would remind me to wear a coat. Dad, though, his calls were different. He always asked about money. "You still got plenty left in that college fund, right? You managing your accounts wisely?" I'd laugh, not realizing that those were the questions of a man mapping an escape route. It was in my second semester that the first crack appeared. My rent payment bounced. I thought it was a banking error. Then my tuition installment was declined. My account balance, which should have been comfortably above 20,000, showed less than $200. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours, my breath catching in my throat. I refreshed. Again and again, the numbers didn't change. They stared back, silent and cruel. At first I blamed myself. Maybe I'd mismanaged something. Maybe the bank made a mistake. I called them. They confirmed the transactions withdrawals made back in the US, authorized by my father. My hands shook as I sat there in that tiny London dorm room, surrounded by the soft hum of other people's laughter and the muted sound of rain outside. I called home immediately. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, kiddo," he said, his voice casual, almost cheerful. "Dad," I whispered, "where's my money?" There was a pause, that kind of pause that splits reality in two. "Oh," he said finally, "you mean the fund?" "Relax, Vanessa. I used it. It's just a temporary thing." My heart stopped. "Used it for what?" He sighed like I was overreacting. "You don't understand. I had some business loans to clear. I was going to replace it once things stabilized. It's not like you need it right now." I felt the room spin. I needed that for tuition, for my degree. "Come on," he said. "Don't be dramatic. You're smart. You'll get a scholarship or something. You always do." I could hear the sound of ice clinking in his glass. My father had stolen my future, and he was drinking while explaining why it was fine. I hung up before I could scream. That night, I sat on the cold floor of my dorm room and stared at my reflection in the black glass of my laptop screen. I looked calm, but inside I was unraveling. Every late-night shift, every saved paycheck, every word of encouragement from Grandma gone, just like that. Over the next few weeks, I juggled calls with the university, the bank, and my scholarship committee. I borrowed money to cover tuition. I worked double shifts, surviving on coffee and adrenaline. I told no one at first, not even my mother, because shame has a way of sealing your lips. But secrets rot when kept in silence, and mine began to eat me alive. When I finally told Mom, she didn't believe me at first. "Your father wouldn't do that," she said softly. "There must be some misunderstanding." But then she called the bank, and when she called me back, she didn't speak. I could only hear her breathing, short, panicked, disbelieving. She whispered, "He told me he needed to borrow something from the joint savings. I didn't know he meant your fund." Her voice cracked on the word your. The following days blurred together. My grandmother called me, her voice trembling with fury. "He didn't just take your money," she said. "He took your trust. That man's been lying to all of us for years." That was the beginning of everything, unraveling the marriage, the illusion, the family name we'd wrapped so carefully around our dysfunction. But here's the thing about betrayal: it doesn't end you, it transforms you. While my father was busy hiding behind excuses, I was busy collecting evidence: bank statements, email trails, the withdrawal authorization he'd forged with my digital signature. My Aunt Sarah, who was a lawyer, helped me piece it all together. We discovered he hadn't just taken my college fund, he'd also used Grandma's retirement savings as collateral for a gambling loan. He'd been doing this for years, rotating debts, juggling lies. And he thought I'd stay quiet because I was the good daughter. But he forgot that I wasn't the little girl he could charm with apologies anymore. I was a woman who had lost everything and had nothing left to fear. I flew back home that summer. When I walked into our house, he was sitting at the kitchen table reading the newspaper like nothing had happened. My mother stood by the window, pale and silent. He looked up, smiling. "Vanessa, look at you all grown up." I didn't sit. I didn't smile. I just placed the folder of evidence on the table and said quietly, "We need to talk." He laughed, actually laughed, until I slid the last page across to him, a printout from his online account, showing the gambling transactions linked to my fund. His face changed. The color drained from it. "Where did you get this?" "I learned from you," I said. "You taught me how to dig through lies." For the first time in my life, my father had no words. That moment, that silence, was the sound of his empire of deceit collapsing. He stared at those papers for a long time, as if the ink itself might rearrange into a version of reality where he wasn't the villain. My mother stood frozen by the window, gripping her robe like it was armor. The clock ticked behind us, each second slicing through the tension. Finally, he pushed the papers back toward me. "You don't understand," he said, voice cracking with practiced authority. "I didn't steal it, I just borrowed it. Families help each other, Vanessa. You think I didn't put food on this table for 25 years? You think I didn't work for this family?" I wanted to laugh. Instead, I whispered, "You didn't borrow it, Dad. You forged my name." His jaw tightened. "Watch your tone." "I'd rather watch your signature," I said quietly. "Because I printed every document from the bank. They have security footage, too." For the first time, I saw fear flicker behind his arrogance. He looked at my mother as if she might jump in to save him, but she didn't. Her lips were trembling. Her eyes, the same soft brown as mine, were wet with something deeper than sadness. Maybe disbelief. Maybe shame. She whispered, "Greg, tell me you didn't do this." He slammed his fist on the table. "Don't you start, Linda. You knew the pressure I've been under. The bank was going to take everything. What was I supposed to do, let them destroy us?" I looked at him, and for a second I almost believed the performance. He was good at this. He always had been. He could twist guilt into something noble. He could make ruin sound like sacrifice. But not this time. "Destroy us," I said softly. "You destroyed me." He looked up sharply as if the words had actually hit him. "I was surviving in another country," I said. "Working nights, skipping meals, selling my textbooks to keep studying while you were gambling away my future. You took the one thing that made me feel safe, and you did it like it meant nothing." He looked at me for a long time, then sighed like I was being ungrateful. "You're young, Vanessa. You'll recover. I've got bigger problems to deal with." I felt my heart harden. That was the moment something inside me snapped into clarity. I wasn't going to argue anymore. I was done begging him to understand the difference between a father and a thief. I stood up and said calmly, "You do have bigger problems. Because this isn't just about family anymore. It's about fraud." He blinked. "You wouldn't—" "I already did," I said. "Aunt Sarah's filing the paperwork." My mother gasped softly. He went pale. "You reported me." "No," I said, picking up the folder. "I reported what you did." He stood, voice rising. "You'll ruin everything, your mother, this house, my reputation. You ruined those yourself." I walked out before he could say another word. My mother followed me into the hallway, her voice shaking. Vanessa, please, he's still your father. I stopped and looked at her, really looked at her. The woman who had spent her life cleaning up after his lies, apologizing for his failures. Mom, I said softly, you've been saving him for 20 years. It's time someone saved us. Her shoulders sagged. She didn't say another word. The days that followed were a blur of paperwork, court filings, and heavy silence. My grandmother came over every morning with coffee and quiet strength. She didn't say I told you so, even though she had warned my mother years ago. She just looked at me and said, keep your head high. Truth doesn't need to shout. Aunt Sarah handled everything with surgical precision. She gathered bank statements, digital trails, and witness testimonies, every email, every transaction, every timestamp. The evidence was undeniable. When the notice arrived, the official civil suit, my father called me 15 times in one afternoon. I didn't answer. The next day he came to my grandmother's house, slamming on the door until she opened it. He looked smaller somehow, though his voice still carried that familiar arrogance. You're really going to drag your own father into court? He spat. Do you have any idea what people will think? I stood up from the couch. Yeah, I said. They'll think I stopped being afraid of you. He sneered. This isn't strength, Vanessa, it's betrayal. I took a step closer. No, Dad. Betrayal is stealing your daughter's education and pretending it's love. He didn't answer. He just stared at me like he didn't recognize me, and maybe he didn't. Because the girl who once begged for his approval was gone. When he left, Grandma turned to me and said quietly, that's the face of a man who just realized the game's over. The court proceedings lasted months. My father tried every trick, claiming bankruptcy, blaming financial miscommunication, even implying that I had approved the transfers. But Aunt Sarah tore through each lie like tissue paper. The moment that broke him came when the judge asked if he'd like to speak. He stood there sweaty and red-faced and said I was just trying to protect my family. The judge glanced at me. From what their own money, the courtroom laughed softly. My father didn't. By the time it was over, he was ordered to repay every cent with interest and surrender part of his property to cover damages. The legal language was cold, but to me it felt like poetry. Still, victory didn't taste like I thought it would. It wasn't sweet. It was quiet. It was me standing in a parking lot after the hearing, breathing for the first time without guilt. My mother filed for divorce 2 weeks later. She moved in with Grandma for a while. I visited her one evening after work, and we sat on the porch watching the sun dip behind the trees. She looked tired but lighter somehow. I kept waiting for him to change, she said, but I think I was really waiting for someone to make him face what he'd done. I nodded. Sometimes love makes us blind. She smiled faintly. And sometimes love is the person who opens your eyes. Months passed. My life began to settle into something new, something peaceful. I finished my degree, started my job in cybersecurity, and built a savings account from scratch. It wasn't easy, but every paycheck felt like reclamation. Then one morning I received a letter in the mail. The handwriting stopped me cold. It was from him. I almost threw it away, but curiosity won. Inside was a single sheet of paper. I'm sorry, kiddo. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that losing your respect hurt more than losing the money. There was no signature, just his initials, GC. I folded it once and placed it in a drawer. Because forgiveness, I realized, doesn't always come as a gift. Sometimes it's a boundary. A year later, my grandmother passed away peacefully in her sleep. At the funeral, I saw my father standing in the back of the church alone. He didn't approach me, and I didn't approach him. Our eyes met for a second, two ghosts of what once was, and that was enough. After the service, I sat by her grave and whispered, "You were right, Grandma. Truth didn't need to shout. It just needed to survive." And it had, because I did. I share this story, not because I want pity, but because I know there's someone out there listening. Someone who's been betrayed by the person they trusted most. Maybe it's not about money. Maybe it's love, respect, or time you can never get back. But I want you to know something you can rebuild. You can turn pain into purpose. Forgiveness doesn't mean you let them stay. It means you stop letting them live rent-free inside your mind. And sometimes the greatest revenge isn't seeing them suffer, it's seeing yourself heal.